Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The time is now 5:30, and I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for October 25th, 2021. We will start with a moment of silence and then the pledge to the U.S. flag and the Texas flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Due to some time restraints with some athletic performances or practices tonight, we're going to pause number 2, and we're going to go ahead and jump to number 3, and then we'll come back to the presentations of the students. I believe some of them were still at football practice. Public forum, we will say at 5:31, and the first speaker I have is Courtney Ratliff, and Mr. Ratliff will speak on South Elementary. Mr. Ratliff, welcome to the podium.
Superintendent Ramsey, Mr. Pounds, and members of the board, good evening. Before I address my main concern, let me take a moment to commend the fine arts happening in MISD. The theater departments, choirs, orchestras, and bands at both Midland High and Legacy are off to an amazing start. Statistically, the fine arts play a critical role in achieving academic success. It was no coincidence that when MISD had its highest academic ratings in the 90s, the fine arts programs were being recognized as among the best in the nation. It's time to pay attention and invest again in the arts. With that, I sincerely hope that a contingency from administration, including your rarely seen fine arts director, will be in El Paso this Saturday to see both of your bands compete at the UIL Area A contest, with an opportunity to represent Midland at the state marching contest in San Antonio. Now to the actual reason I am addressing you today. The water situation at South Elementary, located in Mr. Marquez's District 2, is in very poor condition. It was a few fearless parents who identified and brought to the district's attention the water issue at Fannin Elementary previously that led to the installation of at least one RO water system on each elementary campus. While the basic requirement was met, the practical execution of the plan was an epic failure, at least at South. The RO system was installed at the furthest end of the campus, opposite of the playground, and in a part of the school that is not commonly used. It is not close to the cafeteria, which has to cook the students' food using bad water. Again, the basic requirement was met, but the execution was poor. Kelly Spencer and Wes Jones showed an interest in improving the situation at South, but not until after the completion of Phase 2 of the RO filtration system project at the secondary campuses. Phase 2 completion could take up to 3 years. The elementary students at South shouldn't have to wait for 3 years in order to have their basic need for clean water met. The learning environment plays a role in student success, and due to the water conditions at South, those students do not have a quality learning environment. Immediate problems require immediate solutions. The ball is now in your court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratliff. we agree with you that we wish both bands well this weekend in El Paso. The next speaker I have, and I'm going in order, is Seth, but I think that is Matt Galindo's son. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Galindo to come forward, and then your son can speak with you after that. And the topic on both is South Water.
Good evening. What we're passing out there are the work orders that I asked for during an opens record request. So that's the work orders, and then that first document that you see there was provided by Mr. Wes Jones, the head of maintenance for MISD, regarding the amount of RO system water fountains that can be found. As you can see, the numbers are off. You have schools like South that have one at the back end of their school, while other schools have multiple, if not all of them, installed. I just wanted to give you a time frame of what we've been doing. On September 15th, I was invited by South Parent Liaison, Ms. Barbara Yarbrough, to discuss the project that she's working on. During that time, she informed us of the issues with the water. And so with that being said, on September 24th, I asked for those documents that you have now from the district. So everything that I'm providing is from the district. We requested that to see if that information that they're telling us at South is accurate. And as you can tell, those are 3 years worth of work orders when it comes to plumbing and issues with water. On September 28th, my wife and I met with the principal at South to discuss the issues and ask for permission to help get these basic needs met. As is the culture of MISD, the principal asked that let us know, of course, we can help, but there's only so much she can say and do as an employee. But that's, of course, y'all know that, and everybody else knows how that goes. And so we assured her that we would take care of that. On October 6th, I met with Kelly Spencer and Wes Jones at the downtown office to talk about this. They informed me of the facilities committee that has been in place and talk about that 10-year plan of updates. However, this issue cannot wait any longer. We need action, and we need it now. On October 7th, I sent an email and I invited Dr. Ramsey, Mrs. Spencer, Mr. Wes Jones, Mr. Michael Booker, Mr. Marquez, and Mr. Murray to a community meeting. The reason I had that community meeting is because we've yet to have community meetings. We can't be a voice for the community if we're not willing to actually meet with the community and represent them. So I went ahead and had my own community meeting at the MLK Center on October 14th. On October 14th, the community met. And Mr. Murray, you were there, and I appreciate you going. Mr. Booker, you made it the last 10 minutes. And of course, Mr. Marquez, the one that represents the school, wasn't able to be there. We talked about that. Of course, we didn't get anywhere with that. We don't really have any solutions yet. On October 15th, I reached out to Mr. Marquez. Again, no answer. On October 15th, October 19th, I met with local church leaders to get this issue addressed and come up with a plan. We're taking a page out of the Coleman Interveners, and we're coming together as a community to take care of our babies. On October 25th, today I'm addressing you, and October 29th on Friday, Dr. Ramsey and I are going to have a meeting with the principal at South to get this addressed. I just want to let you all know that we have followed the chain of command. We are trying to do what's right. We're doing this the right way. We're not hollering and screaming. We don't have the news just yet, but we are letting you know that we have been advised to take the next necessary steps in getting this taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galindo, and we'll hear from your son, Seth.
Hi, my name is Seth, and I would like to say my friends at South Elementary deserve better drinking water, so I would like them to have better drinking water like all the other kids in Midland. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Okay, our next speaker on my list is Cassie Merrill. And Ms. Merrill also has Tyron Merrill with her. And they will be speaking on Bluest Sky and Early College High School at Midland College and Midland College Book.
My name is Cassie Merrill. 3 minutes is not nearly enough time to cover what I need to while standing in front of the board of a district that I feel is broken at its core. I have contemplated for over a month of what I could possibly say to you that would evoke any emotion that would lead to some sort of action, because I know I'm not the first to stand here and tell you that something's terribly wrong with this school district, and I know I won't be the last. About a month ago, you received an email regarding a novel that was issued to the 9th grade pre-AP English class at Early College High School. I'm the mom that sent you that email. Why is it necessary for my 14-year-old to tell a bunch of adults in a school that what they're issuing their students is wildly inappropriate? To this day, no one has owned up to or apologized for this. It has been classified simply as a miscommunication. This is the second year this book has been used in curriculum, the second year it's been complained about. So how is this a miscommunication for 2 years? I hope that each of you read my email in its entirety, and I hope it made you uncomfortable. I hope it made you sweat, knowing that you employ teachers and administration that give pornographic material to students and call it education. When I asked the teacher if she felt this book was justified, if she could justify handing a bunch of teenagers a book that includes the ancestral rape of an 11-year-old girl, masturbation, violent scenes of domestic abuse, and reading about what pedophiles do to little girls, she said yes. When I gave the notes to the principal, she pushed them back across the table and said, I'm well aware of what's in the book. So my question to you is, where is the system of checks and balances? Who is leading these teachers? Who's making sure that what they are teaching is appropriate? When I sent my email to the teacher and the vice principal, I thought it would be an easy fix. I thought an apology would be issued and we could move on with our lives. The half-truths, whole lies, the excuses, the open records requests that I've had to submit to get any sort of answer is so overwhelming, daunting, and quite frankly terrifying. This district lacks real transparency entirely. There's over 26,000 students in your hallways every day. They deserve better. They deserve to leave this district better than when they came in, not worse. Everyone in this room, everyone that's employed by MISD, everyone that receives a paycheck should be on the same team. So why do we as a community, as the parents of the students you claim to love and want to succeed, feel like we are fighting a war against you? These are not your children. These are our children, and we should be included in what is being taught to them. It's been made clear to me through this experience that the administration of this school district has a very little idea of what's being taught in their classrooms. If you have the children's best interests at heart, you will provide real transparency and include parents, because no one is more invested, more passionate, or wants our children to succeed more than we do. My children will be fine. There's 26,000 students in your hallways, and some of them will not be fine. They deserve better, and you should care enough about all of them to do better and be better.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. Now we will hear from Tyron Merrill, and it's Early College High School at Midland College and Midland College Book. Welcome, Mr.
My name is Tyron Merrill. I'm 14 years old, and up until 2 weeks ago, I was a student at Early College High School. I wanted to be here and speak today for the opportunity to make sure the adults here know what is happening in the classrooms. So you can't say you didn't know. I wanted you to see my face and know my name. I'm one of the freshmen that was issued the novel The Bluest Eye. I have never been more disgusted and disappointed in this school district as I am now. I am only one of the students that this school district has failed. Even worse, I don't think you care. You don't care because it's not you. You don't care because it's not your child. You don't care because it's me, a single child in a district of many. How would you feel if your child was handed pornographic literature to read for education without your consent? I'm not here just for me. I'm here to tell you that you have failed so many kids. So many kids who may not have someone to advocate for them. I feel like you're failing at what you came here for. It makes me question the morals and intentions of every adult involved. If you can get away with letting this pass as education, what else can you get away with? Why should anyone trust you? More than one adult in the situation knew the content of this book. According to the principal, the book was selected to prepare us for the College Board AP Standards of Character Development complexity, literary elements, major themes, and context. I like to read, so I have read many books by people of many different ethnicities, races, genders, and sexualities. Out of the many that I have read, I am confident that I could find at least one book that could teach all of the same concepts without being pornographic in nature. In 2001, Paul Rosen and Edward Roisman documented negativity bias. Simply stated, negative stimuli command more attention than positive stimuli. It suggests that in order to counteract one negative thought or emotion, you need to find 5 positive ones. How are we to focus on the literary elements we are trying to be taught in this book? There were 20 detailed book excerpts in my mom's notes which were negative in nature. So by this 1-to-5 ratio, we would need 100 positive things in this book to level out the positive and negative thoughts. I couldn't find one positive thing, let alone 100. To point out how terrible this book makes you feel, my Christian friend said that she felt she had to repent after reading this book because it's worse than watching it. You're imagining it. You feel as if you are the one who's guilty of reading it, not the teacher who decided it was safe to expose to 13, 14, and 15-year-olds. I had an opportunity at ECHS to get a head start in my career, to graduate with an associate's degree at 18. I feel like it came at too high of a cost, and that makes me mad. My future shouldn't weigh so heavily on the morals and twisted minds of individuals who dare call themselves educators. Why won't anyone take the blame for this and apologize? You all are worse than a class of 14-year-olds when someone breaks the teacher's favorite lamp. True experience, by the way. And, where was I? Oh, you would have a lot less upset people if someone would just admit to the mistake and apologize. I'm disappointed in all the adults involved, and I know I'm not alone in this regard. This school district has fallen apart, and I'm so glad I no longer have to be a part of it. I share all these thoughts with other people, but give credit where credit's due. These are my own thoughts with suggestions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Dr. Ramsey, do you know if the students are here? Okay, we'll go back. The time is 5:46, and we're going to go back and welcome Ms. Ladd to the podium.
Good evening, trustees. As you know, here at Midland ISD, we proudly share that our mission is to prepare all students for college or career. One measure of college readiness is the SAT, otherwise known as the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. Every year, tens of thousands of students across the country and even the world take the SAT as they prepare to enter college. Of these, 34,000 have been recognized as commended students for their high level of achievement and excellence. We are very proud that 5 of these students are right here in Midland ISD. According to the National Merit Scholarship Corporation, those being named commended students have demonstrated outstanding potential for academic success. These students represent a valuable national resource, and recognizing their accomplishments, as well as the key role their schools play in their academic development, is vital to the advancement of educational excellence in our nation. We hope that this recognition will broaden the students' educational opportunities and encourage them as they continue their pursuit of academic success. So it is my pleasure tonight to welcome several of them to the stage, and if you will come around for a photo. I would first like to invite Andrew Midahovsky and Early College High School Assistant Principal Renee Barrientos to join our trustees on stage for a photo. Next, we would like to welcome Gunnar Mead and Trevor Van Heusen with Legacy High School Principal Shannon Torres. And Jennifer Fisher was also a commended student from Legacy, but she is not able to be here tonight. Great. That's it.
All right, the next item we have on the agenda is public hearing. So, Mr. Dodds, as you make your way up here, I just want to make one note I should have started with. Mr. Marquez couldn't be here tonight. He had a death in the family, and he's attending a service tonight. And so he asked that you just honor him in not being here tonight. So I appreciate that. But, Mr. Dodds, the time is now 5:51, and we will open a public hearing for the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas, the first report. Mr. Dodds.
Good evening, President Murray, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Ramsey. I'm here to present the first report of Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas in a public forum, or public hearing. This is the 2021 first rating based off of the 1920 school data. And you can see where it was developed in 1999. The goals were set out. The district ratings according to indicators developed by the Commissioner of Education and is tied to our audit and in PEIMS information. The scoring is for superior rating, which is an A, is a 90 to 100, above standard 80 to 89, and meet standard is 70 to 79. Any critical indicators, which are the first four indicators of the report, if you do not get a pass on those, it's an automatic F. This year it was increased to 20 indicators. In the past it's been 15 indicators, and you see the information that it covers in all the 20 indicators. In indicator 1 was a complete annual financial report data submitted to TEA within 30 days of November 27th or January 28th. That was a pass. We actually had a waiver this year for the COVID year, but we actually they received our data on time and didn't need a waiver. Indicator 2 was an unmodified opinion of the annual financial report, and that's the best that you can get as far as from external auditors, and we passed this indicator. And indicator 3 was a district in compliance with all payment terms of all debt agreements for the fiscal year, and we were. For indicator 4, did the district make timely payments to TRS, the Texas Workforce Commission, Internal Revenue, and other government agencies, and we did all those on time, and we passed that indicator. Indicator 5 was not scored this year. It hadn't been scored in several years. Indicator 6 was the average change in assigned or unassigned fund balances over 3 years. Less than 25% decrease of the current year's assigned or unassigned fund balance, and then it exceeds 75 days of the operational expenditures, and our fund balance does that, and we pass this indicator. Indicator 7 was the number of days of cash on hand and current investments in the general fund. Was it for the district's sufficient to cover operating expenditures, and it was. Actually, we had about 248 days worth of cash and investments on hand. Indicator 8 was a measure of current assets to current liability ratio for the school district sufficient to cover short-term debt. And this we received less than 10 on. We received 6 points. Our current assets, you can see, was $366 million at the time. Our current liabilities was $179. And the reason we had 4 points deducted was we held, according to law, we're able to hold our recapture payment until August. Our fiscal year ends June 30th. So that created a liability of $154 million that we were able to fiscally support the district because we were able to earn interest on that money all the way to August instead of paying it out monthly payments in February through August. So it did cost us a couple points, but it did earn us additional revenue for the district, and that's will be the next year will be the same way because we did the same thing for this current year. But that is the only reason that we received a deduction is we followed what our contract said with TEA, but we got some points deducted off of it. Indicator 9, did the school district's general fund revenues equal or exceed expenditures? And yes, it did, and we received 10 points. Indicator 10 is a new indicator this year. Did the school district average less than 10% variance when comparing budgeted revenues to actual revenues for the last 3 fiscal years? And we barely made this one. That is because they take the budgeted revenues in snapshot, which is in October, and then they wait to the end of the year for the actuals. Here in Midland and in the oil belt, a lot of times we get supplemental value increases that can change our revenue after October, because usually we don't receive those until about January or December, and so we have no way of knowing in October when the snapshot is done. So that's the reason for the differences, and in some cases, in some area school districts, it actually they weren't able to qualify for this one because of those supplemental value increases that we receive here in the oil field that a lot of school districts across the state don't receive. Indicator 11, was the ratio of long-term liabilities to total assets for the school district sufficient to support long-term solvency? And we received the full 10 points on this. Indicator 12 is a new one also. Was the debt per 100 of assessed property value ratio sufficient to support future debt repayments? And we received all 10 points on this one also. We met we were above that. We were less than 4, which was that was what it needed to be. Indicator 13, was the school district administration cost ratio equal to or less than the threshold? And you can see we were quite a bit below the threshold for our size district, which would be 10,000 students and above. Indicator 14, did the school district not have a 15% decline in the students to staff ratio over 3 years? A lot of these questions are double negatives, and so sometimes the answers look a little weird, but we did not have a 15% decline in a student to staff ratio, so we received all 10 points on that indicator. Indicator 15 is another new one. Was the school district ADA within the allotted range of the school district biennial pupil projections submitted to TEA? Every 2 years we have to submit what we think our pupil projections, our average daily attendance will be for the next 2 years. And so we were in the variance that for this projection. I think actually this one will not be counted next year since COVID, everybody's ADA was messed up, so that I think that one will already be gone. But we were in the variance for that and received all 5 points for that one. Indicator 16 did the comparison of the Public Education Information Management System, or PEMS, data to lack information in the school district's annual financial report result in a total variance less than 3%. And we were less than 3%. And what that is when we report our PEMS data for the mid-year PEMS submission, we have to match what the audit says. And so we were within that variance and passed that indicator. Indicator 17, did the external independent auditor report that the annual financial report was free of any instance of material weakness in internal controls or financial reporting in compliance with local, state, and federal funds? We passed this. We had no material weakness or anything indicated on our annual financial report. Indicator 18, did the external independent auditor indicate that the annual financial report was free of any instances of material non-compliance for grants, contracts, and laws related to local, state, or federal funds? And we passed this indicator and had no non-compliance issue on our audit. Indicator 19, did the school district post the required financial information on its website according to government code and local government code and Texas Education Code, the Texas Administrative Code, and other statutes? And yes, we do. So that resulted in a 5-point. And in indicator 20, did the school board members discuss the district property values at the board meeting within 120 days before the district adopted the budget? And if you remember, we discussed that a couple times in our budget workshops. So we passed that indicator. So our result out of 100 points was a 96, which is an A for a superior rating for the 1920 data for the 2021 rating. There are also several other requirements. Before I go on, is there any questions? I know I went through that pretty fast, but.
Board members, do we have any questions or comments?
The other disclosures that comes along with the first is was outside compensation received by the superintendent, and the superintendent did not receive any outside compensation for the 1920 school year. Superintendent board gifts, there were no gifts over $250 presented to the board. And then this disclosure just shows how much was spent by each board member and the superintendent during that year for travel and for training. And then the additional reporting requirements, there was no business transactions between the school district and board members, and the superintendent contract is posted on the website. And so will this report is posted on the website also if you want to go look at it again later on. And that's the end of the public hearing, unless anyone has any questions.
Mr. Dodds, I don't have a question, but I do want to make one comment. I think the last several years we have received 100 on this first report. And this year in 2020, we made a decision to give up the 4 points to earn a little more money for the district because contractually we were allowed to do that.
Yes.
And so I want to make that clear. The only reason we didn't get 100 is because we decided to make a little more money for the district and bring that money in and then still pay our current liability on time with the state.
Correct.
Any other comments?
And that was allowable by House Bill 3. It changed the rules that you could hold it until August at that time. And so that's the contract we signed with DEA at the time.
And that money was local tax dollars that we have to send to the state and cannot be used here locally, we decided at least get some interest on that money before we send it to Austin, not have the benefit of it.
That's right. Now, it'd be a lot better if the interest rates were higher, but that is what we did. And that was in the tune of about $154 million this past year, and about the same, I believe, 153 before.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dodds. And with that, unless there are further questions, we will close the public hearing at 6:05.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to my financial team and truly, this is a district report. Everybody has their hand in what happens and how this is done. But a special thanks to our financial team that does such a great job. So thank y'all.
Thank you, and thank you to the team as well. The next item on the agenda is item number 5, consent agenda. Item A, board meeting minutes, found on page 92. B, monthly financials, found on page 96. Item C, quarterly investment report, found on page 108. Item D, budget amendment, found on page 121. Item E, contracts over $100,000, page 124. Item F, RFP 2107, multi-tiered system of support implementation program, found on page 126. Item G, personnel appointments, found on page 176. And item H, district improvement plans / campus improvement plans, found on page 180. Board, do you have any of these items that you would like to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, those will be deemed approved under consent. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 6, district presentations, trustee continuing education report. And so I think we have maybe a slide for that, but while you're looking through that, I'm going to go ahead and read the report to you. So I apologize. This is kind of lengthy, but it's required by the state, and so I'm just going to give it to you as it states. Under the State Board of Education rule, completing required continuing education each year of a service is a basic obligation and expectation of any sitting board member. As board president, I'm required to announce the name of each member who A, has completed the required continuing education, B, has exceeded the required continuing education, C, is deficient in meeting the required continuing education. The requirements for training are measured as of the first anniversary of the date of the trustee's election or appointment, or 2-year anniversary of his or her previous training as applicable. There are 7 training areas for board members continuing education. Number 1, local district orientation. Number 2, orientation to the Texas Education Code. Number 3, post-legislative updates to the Texas Education Code. 4, team building. 5, additional continuing education. 6, evaluating student academic performance and setting goals. 7, identifying and reporting abuse, trafficking, and other maltreatment of children. To the extent applicable to each board member, I will announce the completion or deficiency as to required training. For members who still have time remaining to complete the required training, I will announce those board members who have scheduled timely training and those who have not yet scheduled the training. At the conclusion of the announcement, I will announce any board members' training in excess of the continuing education requirements. The following first-year board members have completed the local district orientation training: Michael Booker and Katie Joyner. The following first-year board members have completed the orientation to the Texas Education Code training: Michael Booker and Katie Joyner. The following board members have completed post-legislative update to the Texas Education training: Tommy Bishop, Michael Booker, Rick Davis, Katie Joyner, Robert Marquez, Brian Murray, John Trischetti. The following board members have completed the annual team building training, which is all 7 again: Tommy Bishop, Michael Booker, Rick Davis, Katie Joyner, Robert Marquez, Brian Murray, and John Trischetti. The following board members have completed the additional continuing education requirements. Again, it's all 7: Tommy Bishop, Michael Booker, Rick Davis, Katie Joyner, Robert Marquez, Brian Murray, and John Trischetti. The following board members have completed the biennial training on evaluating student academics, performance, and setting goals. Again, we're at all 7. Tommy Bishop, Michael Booker, Rick Davis, Katie Joyner, Robert Marquez, Brian Murray, and John Trischetti. The following board members have completed the biennial training on identifying and reporting abuse and trafficking. That is all 7 once again. Tommy Bishop, Michael Booker, Rick Davis, Katie Joyner, Robert Marquez, Brian Murray, and John Trischetti. Board member Tommy Bishop exceeded the requirement of continuing education training by 24.75 additional hours. Board member Michael Booker exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 46.85 additional hours. He's an overachiever. Board member Rick Davis exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 13.75 additional hours. Board member Katie Joyner exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 26.75 additional hours. Board member Robert Marquez exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 11.7 additional hours. Board member Brian Murray exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 29.5 additional hours. And board member John Trischetti exceeded the required amount of continuing education training by 12.88 additional hours. There is also cybersecurity training which is required each year. All 7 board members have completed that training. Board members, do you have any questions about the trustee continuing education report? Does that have to be approved? It's not an action item. Thank you. Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 7, which is the district reports, and these are report only. Item 7A, superintendent update, found on page 256. Item B, 2020-2021 bilingual and ESL program evaluation, found on page 261. Item 7C, innovation update, found on page 278. And item 7D, staffing update, found on page 322. Board members, do you have any questions that you would like to have one of these items pulled for discussion tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to our action items. Item 8, discussion action items. A, academic update and board goals. And I would like to welcome Ms. Martinez and Jay Davila to the podium. Say it again. Dr. Davila. I apologize. They don't give me that information here. You have a J, so I appreciate you.
Good evening, Board President Murray, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Ramsey. Yes, this is Dr. Josefa Davila. She's one of our executive directors of learning, leading, and innovation. So we're here this evening to report out on goal progress measures 1.2 and 1.3, which address the percentage of students that are reading on or above grade level in grades kinder and first grade. These 2 GPMs fall within Board Goal 1 in our Lone Star Board governance. So in partnership with Dr. Josefa Davila, who is which I mentioned was one of our executive directors of Learning, Leading, and Innovation, we're going to provide an overview of where our students are performing based on beginning of year data, which was recently collected. And we're going to look and just see how much progress we need to make from right now towards that end of year target that you see here on this slide. I'll do the presentation on the 2 data slides, and then when I finish, I'll take any questions you may have regarding the data, and then I will hand it over to Dr. Josefa Davila, who will walk us through an overview of some instructional next steps that we are taking to address the data that I will be presenting. So the first slide here is Goal Progress Measure 1.2, and again, this is outlining students in kindergarten that are reading on or above grade level. As you can see here on the PowerPoint slide, our target for the end of year is to have 67% of our students considered on or above grade level at the minimum. So I do want to make it clear that that 55% is just the beginning of year data that we recently collected. And so based on this beginning of year data of 55%, this is where we are in terms of students being considered on grade level. And as you can see, we have a minimum of 12 percentage points from this point in time until the end of year to gain at the minimum in order to be able to meet our 67% target for kindergarten. Are there any questions about the kindergarten data? Yes, sir.
Sorry, my mic. How is that data snapshot captured if they're kinder? First and second makes some sense because you have a benchmark, but if you're not comparing apples to apples at that point.
The data that we are presenting here was captured through our NWEA MAP assessment that was given to all students, including kindergarten students, at the beginning of the year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so scrapped eye station, as we know, so that was my question. There was
Correct.
no mechanism in place. And so how, day one for 6 weeks, like when are we capturing that?
So so as far as beginning of year data, and I have those, we collected the data for beginning of year between August 23rd and September 13th.
Thank you.
And so then, while I'm on that topic, our middle of year window, where we will collect middle of year data will be December 6th through January 14th. And that's when we'll have that second measure to see if we're making progress towards that end of year target. Any other questions? Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Goal Progress Measure 1.3 outlines that the percentage of students in the first grade that are reading on or above grade level by the end of the school year will be at 69% or above. So again, based on the same assessment at the beginning of the year, same window of time, we collected the data and we show that, let's see, we're showing that 47% of our students at first grade are actually reading on grade level in terms of the beginning of year data for this particular goal progress measure. So you can see here that the gap is a little bit larger than the kindergarten. And again, this is beginning of year, and the 69 indicates end of year data. Questions on that?
I have a question. So how many schools are being incorporated into this number? Is it all of the schools? Have we pulled out charter schools? How are you gathering this
So
number?
we have incorporated all of the schools. The only school that was not incorporated here is IDEA Travis because they use a different measure. So we track their progress based on their performance contract goals that they have in there. And so there's accountability with that in that piece, but as far as this, they do not use the MAP, NWEA MAP. They use a different assessment.
But all of the other schools in district took this test?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Lopez Martinez, we don't have a way of conforming IDEA Travis to perform like every other school in the district as far as the assessment?
No. If I understand your question correctly, do we have a way of looking at their data and comparing
Can we
it?
make them conform to the MAP program as opposed to whatever they're using?
No, sir.
And can we change the contract to make them perform with MAP?
I would have to do a little digging on that and consult with Melissa Ware, who is constantly looking into the, there she comes right here.
We could always open the contracts up for negotiation. Both sides would have to come to agreement.
Okay.
There you go. She's our expert in that area, but yes. So we would have to follow that process. But at this point in time, with the contract that we have in place, no, we cannot. Are there any other questions regarding these beginning of year targets? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Josefa Davila, who is going to now walk us through some of the district actions that we're taking to ensure that we close this gap and that we meet these end-of-year targets.
Good evening, Board President Murray, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Ramsey. Some of the next steps that I'm going to talk about is in regards to the data. We are implementing a literacy framework that is based on 4 components, high leverage components, which are interactive read-alouds, mini lessons, guided reading, and phonics instructions. The elementary campuses have 2 structures in place. One is 90 minutes and one is 120 minutes, where they implement these high leverage strategies into their schedule so that we ensure that we're meeting the students' needs. We also have literacy strategists at the schools, and those literacy strategists are being coached twice a month, and they're also attending training so that, again, we can ensure the fidelity of the literacy framework and then also the alignment of the curriculum that we currently have. We are utilizing, as well as a resource, Fontes and Pinnell, so that we can continue the intervention and the differentiated instruction. We are doing a beginning of the year, like Ms. Martinez mentioned, a middle of the year and end of year, but we also have guided reading and running records and anecdotal notes to ensure that we are continuing and changing any interventions. Any questions?
President Murray, may I ask a question?
Sure, Ms. Jordan.
So we've talked about the literacy strategists before, but just to update me as we move into this year, does every single campus have a literacy strategist?
Every elementary has an FTE for a literacy strategist. There has been some resignations, but yes, we are currently hiring for that position, but yes, they do.
So the position exists at every campus, but not every campus has it filled. Is that correct?
I believe at this time there's only one, but I can double check on that.
Okay, and is that including IDEA and all of our other 1882 schools? So we're including those other schools, but we're not providing the same support into the number, is what I'm kind of getting at.
Yes, and so those schools are, they have the autonomy and they have other supports that they have in place to address their gaps at their schools. So this is not one that they're implementing, but they have other ways to address that.
So if you take out the 1882 schools, now we're looking at every campus having a literacy special.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
May I ask a clarifying question, President Murray?
Sure.
So, my understanding, and I may be incorrect, some of our 1880 schools, they do have them. It's just the IDEA and Sam Houston, because they're Third Futures. Those are the 2 1882 schools that do not have a literacy strategist. Our other 1882 schools do have a literacy strategist. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
We only have, if I'm understanding correctly, we only have Sam Houston being counted in the numbers that does not have this position. Is that correct? And then the other question I have, I know that you list that we're using, my iPad closed on me, the literacy framework and Fontes and Pinnell, but I've heard from several teacher friends of mine that they understand, they've been given the TEKS, they know what they are, but they haven't been given, here is how you teach it. This is the curriculum. Here's your book, essentially, of how you go about doing this. Is that what Fontes and Pinnell does? I'm trying to wrap my brain around what the curriculum looks like, how it's being implemented and taught to our teachers so that they can teach it to our kids.
Mrs. Joyner, I think I can start answering that question. I think that's an outstanding question because overall, in our educational space, there is a misunderstanding of what the curriculum is.
Okay.
Our standards are what we teach from. There is no book, so any book or instructional material that we have, that is not the curriculum. That is merely the instructional material that we use. We start all of our planning from our TEKS. So those are the standards that our students should learn, and then we build lessons from there. And so if there is any thought that a particular textbook or any program or text is going to teach all of the TEKS, that is kind of misinformed. If we think about all of the creators of textbooks and of programs, they're not necessarily made just for our TEKS. They look at all the national standards and then they create versions for different states, in our case for Texas. But if I were to take, if I was an English teacher at high school level, if I were to take the anthology that I received as my instructional material and I tried to teach cover to cover, it would only cover about 2/3 of the TEKS that I needed to cover for that school year. And so there's a difference. There is some freedom in educational teaching practice for our teachers. We do have year at a glance. That's why we have common formative assessments. We look at what the power TEKS are, so the most important standards that we need to cover. But there is not going to be, regardless of how good an instructional material is, there isn't going to be one thing, program, or book that is going to go through every single TEK that a student would need to master. And I'll punt to Dr. Lavila if she wants to add to that.
And to add to what Dr. Ramsey is saying, we are training and coaching the literacy strategists so that in turn they provide that professional development or training to the teachers. We're also going as a team and doing walkthroughs and providing feedback to the literacy strategist and the principal so that then we can hone in on what are the trends, what is the professional development that we need to do as a district, or if we need to differentiate it for the campuses. So teachers are providing that support and the autonomy to create their lesson plans based on the TRS. That's our #1 curriculum, but Alphonsus and Pinnell and everything else is the resource that aligns to our curriculum.
And the reason I ask this question is because I've actually heard from teachers saying it feels like we're reinventing the wheel, like we're having to build it. They know what the standard is, like you said, and I think teachers enjoy the autonomy, but if you're a first-year teacher and you're trying to build what they might view as curriculum of how to teach this day in, day out, that's what I'm trying to get to, and my question is the meat and potatoes of how our teachers are supported in building their lesson plans.
So we'll work with our teacher prep programs because that's what you're supposed to be taught when you're going through your teacher preparation. You're taught pedagogy, pedagogical practices, activities, strategies, and everything from how to write an exam, how to unpack that exam, backwards map, teach your students to mastery, and then go through that iterative process. So if that's not happening, we can talk a little bit, and I know at a future meeting we'll talk a little bit more about induction and how we don't have a mentoring program right now for our brand new teachers because we know that that's a gap, and that's not to throw a pebble to our higher education partners, but we know that all of us who went through teacher school, we arrived that first year of teaching and went, this isn't what they taught us. So we know that there's a gap that we need to fill.
Has that structure that you just described been implemented this year for onboarded new teachers?
So our ESSER dollars and our planning, and just a reminder to everyone that the majority of the team that's sitting out there started this fall.
Right.
And so all those
These
processes
pieces
are coming.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I wanted to identify. Thank you.
Is there any other question?
Dr. Davila, we know the data tells us that 78% of students that go into third grade behind grade level don't catch up before graduation. And so this K through 2 is the foundation upon which all other essential educational skills are built. And you're showing me a graph that shows me that second graders in this district need to improve 22% between now, kindergartners between now and May. All of that to say, how confident are you that the stuff being put into place is going to be able to close that gap, because I mean, we're headed towards a precipice with these students, and especially these K first and second kids. They don't know education in the public school outside of the COVID world. And so I fully acknowledge that creates additional challenges. But there is nothing else that we do, in my mind, that is more vital in public education than early childhood literacy. And those numbers, I think that it's too low. We're saying that 67% is what we want to hit. That's still only 2/3 of our students, you know, and we're not even meeting that. So I have a lot of concern about this topic specifically, but immediately I would like to know how confident the team is that we're going to be able to close that gap between essentially November and May.
Absolutely.
If I can also, I'm so sorry,
Go
Dr.
ahead,
Avila. Just a reminder that not only to everyone, to the board, to everyone here and everyone watching, listening at home, because Lone Star governance goals came into place, and these particular ones came in last December, and basing on baselines. And so that's what those original numbers. So this is what I think the board had a special board meeting. It was right before I got here. Maybe it was December of last year to set these. We did not have NWEA map last year, and so what you're looking at, that gap, that if we'll go back to the very first, or actually if we can go to the second graph, the one just for first graders. So we're looking at, if you could go to the next, thank you. That 47 and the 69, it does look alarming, but we're talking about two different assessments. Last year, at the end of the year, they took the ISIL, is that correct? So I-Station's the program, the exam
ISIP, yes,
is
ma'am.
ISIP.
ISIP.
Thank you. So that 69% that the board set to the 71%, that was based last year on ISIP. We're using NWA map this year because it's a better system. It will better allow us to gauge its norm reference, it's national normed. And so it's not necessarily apples to apples. So we're not starting at a gap, and we probably should have done a better job of explaining that, that 47%, and I understand what you're saying. We're still at a very low, we're less than half. I fully understand, and that's why we all have a sense of urgency about PLCs, about professional development, about building the capacity of our principals and our assistant principals and our teachers. And if you talk to all of those staff members, they're tired. And they're tired because we're doing business in a very different way, because we have a sense of urgency to get our students to a place where we're the best school district in Texas and we're not having a 47% at the beginning. And so if I can just state, I feel very confident in what's happening at our schools now. It is baby steps. Our teachers are having to relearn how we do business in Midland ISD. Our principals are, our assistant principals are, but I do want to state that that gap to start with, it isn't necessarily, we're not comparing apples to apples. It's not that we ended the year at 69 and we started at 47. They are two very different assessments.
Dr. Ramsey, is it your contention that the difference in ISIP and in MAP is 10%? I mean, that's a broad significance. So even if under your...
Sure.
Close that gap for me then.
I could not speak to the statistical significance of NWA MAP, but we can bring back to you or provide in writing to the board what's happening nationally and what the national standard is and where we are from the norm, a standard deviation, how many we are away from the norm in the country. That way we can better provide context to the board as to where we're actually starting.
But your contention is there's a statistical significant difference between ISIP and the current testing.
That is why we moved to the new testing, yes, sir. But I could not tell you from the dais without looking at data and confirming.
But we weren't starting, am I understanding this correct? We weren't starting at 69% on ISIP either, or we were?
So if you look at that target.
We were not, that was just our goal.
But the goal started at the baseline. So if the board, so for everyone to understand the way that the Lone Star governance goals go is you start at the baseline. So that's the baseline. That is where we should have been, starting point, based on the data from the previous year, or I don't know if you used maybe the fall. and then your incremental changes.
Right.
So the annual target last year for 2021 was 63%. So that means that that was growth over what the baseline was.
No, I get that.
Well, where was the baseline?
I don't remember what that number.
But that's what I'm not understanding, is like the baseline isn't here for us to understand what the difference was in how the different testing matched up. Does that make sense?
It
What I'm-
absolutely makes sense, and this actually is a perfect example of why we're going to be looking at dates for a Lone Star Board workshop for two reasons. One is because we have moved to a different assessment, and the second is if you look at this particular gold progress measure, it says we will increase from 70% to 71, but 70 was not the baseline. Because if it was the baseline, then we wouldn't have had annual targets starting as low as 63%. And
Right.
so we need to rewrite these goals so that they make sense.
I think I just feel like the slide may be missing some data in terms of understanding the difference of where we were, the baseline was, even on ISIP, to how we tested beginning of year today. That's what I'm kind of negotiating in my brain, and maybe I'm
Sure, we
misunderstanding.
can absolutely
Yeah.
go back and provide the original baseline data, but it would have been below 63%.
Okay.
And I'm assuming
Even
since our stretches, it was probably below 60%.
Even accepting all of that. Even if there was no Lone Star governments, we're still going to have reading benchmarks for these kids. I mean,
Right.
we're always going to have that piece, whether we call it Lone Star governments or whatever we call it.
Right,
The idea is that we're lower than where we need to be.
correct.
And so what I wanted to hear, I would assume the rest of the board wants to hear, is how confident are we in closing that gap between now and the end of the school year for these students? Accepting everything that Dr. Ramsey said.
Absolutely accepting that and everything that Dr. Davila said. I will tell you, just having been here in the district for a while, I am the most confident that I've been in a long time. Just because of the work that I'm seeing, the commitment and the support that is being put together for the campuses, the identification of where our largest gaps are, and the strategic planning that is going on with all of these individuals here, that is what I can tell you from my perspective. And I don't know if this is relevant or if it addresses what you were saying, but I did go ahead and just pull last year's beginning of year and then where we ended at the end of year, because that's when we were using ISIP. So the goal progress measures that they were reported out end of year in during the May 17th board meeting. And what we saw there was that kindergarten had ended at 61% on or above grade level, and in first grade they had ended at 58%. Those kindergartners had started the year at 50%. So they started at 50% and they ended at 61%. And then the first graders had started at 46% and had ended at 58%. Thank you.
Board, any other questions? If not, I've called for a motion to accept.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Chischetti. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Davis. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the academic update for GPMs 1.2 and 1.3, please show by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, 6-0. The next item on agenda item 8, discussion action items, is B, policy update, DEC. Mr. Pounds.
Thank you, Board President Murray. This is a change to DEC local, our local policy for employee leaves and absences. And the specific changes to this policy relate to our district peace officers. There were 2 new laws passed during the most recent legislative session that require us to provide specific paid leave for our peace officers. The first of which is paid mental health leave when an officer is involved in a traumatic event. The second is for paid quarantine or isolation leave when an officer comes into contact with a communicable disease during their employment. This applies to COVID as well as any other communicable disease. So the district is required to pay leave for these officers when they need to take that time, and the board is required to adopt a policy for both of these new types of leave. And so that's what this is. As you'll see in the attachment, the policy is sort of a general framework. The first leave for a traumatic event for mental health leave is a maximum of 5 days. The quarantine leave is for as long as the isolation period is. And so the details of each policy will be created in our administrative regulations. So the superintendent, working with our chief of police, will develop those specifics for administering that leave. But these policy changes provide sort of a general framework.
I move to approve the proposed policy change to DEC local.
We have a motion by Mr. Triscetti, a second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Bishop.
And I understand the state recommends us make this effective, but I guess, or the question is this actually went through the policy committee and is recommended by me through the policy committee? Okay.
Yes, the policy committee did review the recommendation, and we appreciate the fact that the state was willing to recognize our police officers in these two things. We wish they would have gone further and recognize our teachers in the same kind of capacity as far as the communicable diseases, but they did not at this time. And so without any further discussion, we have a motion by Mr. Triscetti, a second by Mr. Booker. All in favor, please show by raising your right hand. And that's unanimous again. Thank you. The next item is item C, policy update FL. Mr. Pounds.
Ms. Murray, this is a real simple change to our FL local, which relates to student records. So we are required to have a custodian of records for our students student records relating to students who are currently students with the district, as well as students who have withdrawn or graduated from the district. And due to recent changes to our district's service center, we need to change who is the custodian of records for those records for students who have left the district. And so it used to be our director of accountability and PEEMS. We now would like to change the policy so that it's our chief of administrative services. And so it's a simple change, but we need to change that in policy so that we can process those requests.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Davis, a second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion? All in favor, please show by raising your right hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Pounds. The next item on agenda item 8, action items, is item D, Pre-K Academy at Midland College Contract Amendment. This is found on page 348, and this will be Ms. Martinez and Ms. Ware. Thank you for coming forward so fast. It makes it easier for me. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Ramsey, President Murray, Board of Trustees. We are here to present revised performance goals for one of our 1882 partners, the Pre-K Academy at Midland College. In the spring of 2019, Midland ISD authorized an 1882 performance contract with Midland College to operate the Pre-K Academy. Our contract with Midland College includes 5 performance goals. Performance Measure 1 reflects the TEA district rating. Performance Measure 2 addresses social and emotional learning. Performance Measure 3 measures literacy instructional achievement. Performance Measure 4 measures instructional achievement in math. And Performance Measure 5 addresses parent and community engagement. The performance goals for the Pre-K Academy have been updated to reflect a change in the assessment given to their students. The new assessment is more rigorous and more closely aligned to the assessment administered to the pre-K students on other MISD campuses. The proposed revised goals are also more closely aligned with the district's Lone Star Board governance goals. We are here tonight because any changes to the contract must be approved by both the operating partner, Midland College, and the authorizer, Midland ISD. So the proposed changes are for performance measures 2, 3, and 4. There are no changes proposed for performance measures 1 and 5. Performance measure number 2 reflects student outcomes on the social, emotional behavior section of the CLI Engage Progress Monitoring Assessment, and this is the same assessment that we give to all of our pre-K students. Performance measure 3 reflects student outcomes in literacy instruction and has been adjusted to more closely align with the current pre-K board goals. Performance measure 4 reflects student outcomes in math instruction and has also been adjusted to align with the board goals.
Ms. Ware has...
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm supposed to wait till you're done.
No, that's all right. I was just going to get to the next steps part. That's fine. Go ahead.
Has Midland College approved their changes?
They're going to them at their next board. They'll go before them at their next board meeting. And that just goes into what I was about to say. Our next steps include the pre-K team, the pre-K academy team, and our office working together to analyze and monitor assessment data to ensure that all their students meet their end-of-year goals. And then upon approval by our board and the Midland College Board, the revised goals will be submitted to the Texas Education Agency as part of the 1882 Partnership Benefits Approval process.
A motion by Mr. Trischetti, second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion? All those in favor, please show by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mrs. Ware.
Thank you.
That concludes our action items, and we now move, the time is now 6:46, and we will move into closed session in accordance with Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney on any or all subject matters. Subjects or matters authorized by law for the purpose of consultation with the district's attorney concerning matters on which the attorney's duty to the district under Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct clearly conflicts with the Texas open meetings laws, and Section 551.074 for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, to hear complaints or charges against a public officer or employee. We will have one action item when we return from closed session, and appreciate you being here tonight. And now we will move into closed session. The time is now 7:17, and the board has emerged from closed session. We have the next item on the agenda is item number 10, action arising from closed session. A, teacher abandonment, J. Vasquez. 1, good cause did not exist for the resignation, and 2, complaint and request for sanction to TEA.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board has determined good cause did not exist for teacher J. Vasquez to abandon his employment contract, and the board authorized the district to file a complaint with the State Board of Educator Certification.
I have a second from Mr. Booker. The motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion? All in favor, please show by raising your right hand. Thank you. It's unanimous, 6-0. The time is now still 7:17, and we are adjourned. Thank you.